mess around, do you?
It isn't too often that I take the time to indulge myself in horror media. Set aside for exceptions like Stephen King, who writes some pretty awesome books, it's not something that I look into too often. One of the biggest reasons being the fact that I find myself getting bored with horror media really quickly, because I either find it to be too slow, too reliant on shock value, blood and gore can only take your media so far before it just looks foolish, and then you have the cheap relying on jump scares tactic, which admittedly, that can get to me if I'm sleepy enough, but so does opening and closing doors at night, as well as bumping into my fan in the dark. That happens a lot more than you might think. So you think it might be a little weird that I actually picked a horror game for this, but I didn't pick just any horror game, I picked F.E.A.R, the best of the best. But what is F.E.A.R? F.E.A.R is the amazing brainchild of awesome dev team Monolith Productions, who had one goal in mind. They wanted to combine aspects of 90s J-horror and combine it with John Woo action. I'm no expert on 90s J-horror, I haven't watched a single bit of it, but I know it's supposed to be more focused on psychological horror, really getting into your head. That's actually the kind of horror that usually grabs my attention the best. As for John Woo flicks, they're just insane. They try to look for every reason in the world for some poor guy to get shot up by this dude with insane reflexes. It's something. It's something. And F.E.A.R's been looking pretty good because people tend to really like both the action and the horror aspect of it. Now, I've played horror games with plenty of action before. Prey 2017 and Resident Evil 4 come to mind. But F.E.A.R isn't really like them. The only other media I can think of where they have a protagonist that completely wrecks up shop in a terrifying environment is the Evil Dead series, more specifically the second and third film, which are just fantastic films, by the way. I love Bruce Campbell. He's an awesome actor and an awesome fellow Michigander. But let's get past that. Let's talk about the game itself, F.E.A.R. So you are the Point Man, a notorious member of the fictional First Encounter Assault Recon, also known as F.E.A.R. F.E.A.R's been tracking this cloning project under a company known as Armacam Technology Corporation. Specifically, the super soldier plan that will allow one person to control the entire army telepathically. The head of this job, a guy called Paxton Fettel. Now obviously, F.E.A.R doesn't like this, they really don't want this to get out of hand. So you want to kill this guy, Paxton Fettel. So you head over to this apartment building and you find out that basically he just escaped, but not before knocking you out. And you know me, already playing the game before, I kind of fooled around a little bit and just kind of tried to karate kick him, but obviously the plot disagrees. So you end up getting knocked out and he takes off. And yeah, save for any plot critical moments, that's about as far as my knowledge goes with F.E.A.R's story. Now you guys know me. I'm pretty good about stopping and listening to a story and keeping track of it. Or at least, I guess with Final Fantasy, if that means anything. But F.E.A.R hardly holds my attention. I know there are plenty of phone calls and messages that you can listen to get the full scoop in the lore, but I just don't care. I know that's a really lame answer, but like, I just don't care. It's because F.E.A.R doesn't really scare me as a game. Throughout this entire process of recording, I can only think of one moment where the game got to me a little bit. And to be honest, I'm not even really sure if it was intentional or not, just look for yourself. But yeah, not exactly trying to look into lore that doesn't interest me because I'm not immersed. There's also a bunch of moments where the game tries to get into your head, cause hallucinations, and have you fight all these weird hallucination monsters and whatnot, but it doesn't get to me, man. In fact, there's a couple of moments where I even mistakenly looked away from something scary that was supposed to happen. If it tells you anything, there's several moments throughout this game where I just walk in the dark without my flashlight on to see if anything happens or if I get spooked, but it never happens, man. So that's all I really have to say about that. Let's go take a look at the gameplay. So that last section probably left you a little concerned. You're probably wondering, oh no, he probably doesn't like this game too much. No, not true. As we said, this game, one of the best of the best. And F.E.A.R is a fantastic shooter. One of the finest we've got out there. For one, the weapons and the combat scenarios are so fun to mess around with. Every weapon is a really good choice. Every weapon. That includes the pistols. And as you FPS fans know, pistols usually get thrown under the bus. And that's not good. But F.E.A.R? No. The pistols are really, really good. Especially since you can dual wield them. Now, in this playthrough, I didn't use the pistols too much. But trust me when I say it, they aren't useless. They are very, very good. I'd have to say that my two favorite weapons in this game have to be the G2A2 assault rifle and the VK12 combat shotgun. The assault rifle just gets enough ammo, and it just has pretty good stopping power. It hurts pretty good at long distances. And the VK12 combat shotgun, I mean, dude, it's a shotgun, and I love shotguns. It's really good about shredding up enemies at close to mid ranges. You also have other really nice guns like the little plasma rifle that can snipe enemies at a long distance, the triple rocket launcher which shoots 3 rockets in a burst, and the repeater which is like a kind of fast rocket launcher, but you don't see ammo for those as much, so I don't get to mess around with them as much. So they're a little lower on my list. Usually my composition consisted of an SMG, the assault rifle, and the shotgun. That was like the troublesome trio right there. I mean, I guess you could consider the SMG to be a favorite of mine as well, but I usually only used it when I ran out of ammo for the assault rifle or I was getting low on assault rifle ammo. So it was more of a substitute, but I mean, it is pretty nice, and you do move noticeably faster when you have the SMG out. But you know, I'm in it for that stopping power, you know? That stopping power. But hey, good weapons can only take you so far, and F.E.A.R's combat scenarios are really what helps make the game. You see, F.E.A.R uses something called Goal-Oriented Action Planning, or GOAP, as we'll call it for the rest of this video, which is a feature so influential that plenty of action games have adopted that mechanical philosophy afterwards. So what does GOAP do? GOAP allows enemies in F.E.A.R to actively assess the situation and adapt around your playstyle, and depending on the situation, even the environment. I gotta say, it's really amusing seeing the game attempt to counter any plans that I come up with. You might be a little lost, so let me explain some examples. You see an opening flank, and you decide that you want to take that route so that you can get the jump on the enemy. The enemy, if you leave their sight for long enough, will notice that you moved in the general direction of that flank point. So they'll assume that that's where you're trying to go, so they'll position around that to be ready for you. If you're running around with a shotgun in your hands, enemies will almost always try to avoid close encounters with you. If an enemy sees that one of their partners were killed around a certain spot, they'll do one of two things. They'll either avoid that spot altogether, or rush to that spot and pre-fire where your bullets came from. Enemies really don't like standing around explosive barrels. They'll try to stay away from them at all costs unless they absolutely must be by one. Also, they'll shoot an explosive barrel if you get too close to one, so be careful. Now these are the ones I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure there are more. F.E.A.R, with its GOAP system, allows the experience to be pretty much different every time you play it. Because enemies aren't going to always try the same things. They might consider other options or other routes they want to take to try to kill the player. That's pretty neat. It's for this reason that F.E.A.R is a very replayable game. The GOAP system is also really good about compensating for the game's lacking roster, because throughout most of F.E.A.R, you're just going to be fighting grunts. So their unpredictability really aids the experience. But in the words of a corporation, but wait, there's more. So F.E.A.R has this absolute godsend of a mechanic called slow-mo. Slow-mo is awesome. So F.E.A.R can be a little tough at times. In the right situation, you are no stronger than your enemies. To keep F.E.A.R from feeling like this generic cover shooter, slow-mo helps you better assess the situation by giving you a technical advantage. These enemies are no joke, and being able to get the slip on them so easily feels really good. The one thing I don't care for too much is when the game activates slow-mo without your consent, and you're forced to watch this really slow scene where you're like, alright, yeah, that's enough, I get it, I kinda wanna go. But that's a really nitpicky thing. Sadly, no game is perfect, and F.E.A.R, well, you guys know, it's a RoberOnocle video, I gotta complain, I'm sorry. Enemies that aren't the standard grunts kind of fluctuate in quality. The robot enemies can be a little frustrating to fight if you're put in the wrong environment. And the spooky enemies, they just suck. It's clear that they use very little GOAP, unless you consider beelining straight towards the player planned. The pacing of the gameplay can also be a little off at times. The game is usually pretty good about throwing enemies at you in a healthy dose, but sometimes it goes a little overboard. There's moments in F.E.A.R where it just chucks way too many enemies at you at once. And it's not like it's impossible, but it's just annoying. The combat performance of enemies is also a little inconsistent at times. You got some moments where enemies seem like they can't land a single shot on you, and other times, man, it's like the straight out of an 80s action flick, they ain't missing a single shot. And looking at these last two issues I just mentioned, the shotgun, while obviously being really good at making picks, is almost too good of a solution. If you somehow didn't get the message, I love shotguns, like a whole lot, any media. I love them. In fact, if a shooter lacks a shotgun, I'll consider not playing it just because of that. Shotguns are essential to me. But that being said, I'm human, and I don't always want to use a shotgun. Eventually, it will get boring to me. And always using the shotgun, whenever the game gets too oppressive in its nature, can feel like a bit of a cheap solution at times. It's like picking Bastion when your team is losing, you know? It's not like it's necessarily a bad thing, but if you're always doing it, I mean, that just ain't it, chief. But please, keep this in mind. This does not happen that much. F.E.A.R is a very polished game, especially for how old it is. Even then, F.E.A.R's GOAT system might be really nice to you, so this could potentially never ever ever happen to you, or you end up getting frustrated like this. So you won't know until you try it. So then we are blessed with this beautiful expansion, F.E.A.R Extraction Point. I love this stuff. I've generally found that this expansion pack irons out a couple of the issues that the base game had. The experience was more in your face and fast paced without feeling like I couldn't punch back. Heck, I'd say that F.E.A.R Extraction Point even handled its final levels a lot better than F.E.A.R did. May I be real with you? F.E.A.R's finale sucks. You know all of the fun you had, shooting up all these soldiers, not knowing what was gonna hit you, throwing grenades around, all that jazz, shooting up people, you know, all that goodness. Yeah, they just remove all of that. It's just nothing but spookiness now. It just wants to be a scary horror game. And look, as a guy who's not a fan of the spooky aspect of this game, because it ain't scary to me, putting what I like least about the game right in my face for the last few levels, that sucks. And you wanna know what the real kick in the shin is? In these last 2 levels, they even have the nerve to confiscate your weapons twice. So don't you dare have any fun. So here comes good little boy Extraction Point, and they're like, hey, that was stupid, how about we don't do that? And while I gotta admit, Extraction Point did teeter a little bit on what F.E.A.R did wrong in its finale, it's still more action-packed. It all ends with a big fight between the Point Man and a bunch of replica soldiers. There's really only 2 issues I can think of with Extraction Point. The first one is that the plot is like Final Fantasy 3 levels of bad. Now, I know what you guys are saying. Now, hey, wait a minute there, Rob. You said that you didn't care about the story of this game. Why do you care about the plot pacing? Well, see, the thing about the first F.E.A.R game, you know, I say that like this is a completely different game when it really isn't. But the thing about the base game is that even though I didn't care about the plot, it was still comprehensible. I still understood why I was going from place to place. If someone died and the mission objective had changed, or if we found out that what we were looking for was somewhere else, you know, it just made sense. Extraction Point doesn't really make any sense. Things just kind of happen because it can. The deaths of your recurring partners, Jin and Douglas, felt like they were completely unnecessary. That was a lot of shit. The death of your partners, Jin and Douglas, just felt like they didn't need to happen. To this day, I can't even tell you why Jin died. She just kind of did. Like, this stuff made sense when the replica soldiers were going around shooting up everybody. That made complete sense to me because they're the bad guys. But why did Jin die? I mean, I guess because Paxton wanted her to, I guess? And as for Douglas, I mean, look guys, look, I understand, I know, when white people make something scary, the black guy has to die. I understand that. But the way they did Douglas was, it's just ridiculous, man. Like, why do they have to go this hard? Just look at this. Then you just have other characters like Norton Mapes, who is this guy that I'm pretty sure was supposed to die at the end of F.E.A.R, who just kind of returns an Extraction Point because he can, and then he almost immediately leaves the plot again. Like, what was the point of that? I don't understand. Heck, you end up killing Paxton Fettel at the end of F.E.A.R, and then he's still back in Extraction Point, and he's like, this doesn't make any sense. Hey, they said it, not me. But F.E.A.R Extraction Point's second and bigger issue is that I'm pretty sure this game was optimized by a cactus. The base game ran with pretty much no hiccups. It ran very, very good. But I needed a patch for F.E.A.R Extraction Point just to make sure the frame rate didn't dip to like 20 every time I recorded 3 minutes into a session. And even with the patch, It was almost as if the game was trying to drop the frame rate. It was so weird. And even in one level, as you guys can see right here, for about a solid minute and 30 seconds, F.E.A.R extraction point transformed the inside of my PC into Nintendo N64 specs. Why does this happen? But looking past any optimization qualms, you get two really good games back to back. I could talk about F.E.A.R Perseus Mandate, but one, that has nothing to do with the point, man. And two, I kinda didn't like it last I remembered. And look, I really like F.E.A.R. So if your F.E.A.R game makes me want to stop playing it, that's not good. And even as I'm reading this all out for you guys, I still kinda want to go back and play some more F.E.A.R. It's a really good game. I mean, hey, what can I say? Going into a room, lighting up everyone, and activating slow-mo and watch as they all panic, it's some good stuff.
Just stretch.